everybody. Welcome to episode 214 of the Masterclass podcast. And before no, you know what? I am going to introduce my co-host. His name is Dave Hogue. What's up?
Hello, sir. How are you?
I am well. How are you?
I am well as well. So, are you going to talk about our anniversary?
I remembered our anniversary. I just don't remember it's our 8th anniversary, right? 8
We
years
are
as a
on our
podcast.
8 years, yes.
I didn't get you anything. I'm sorry.
I didn't get you anything either, but maybe for the 10th year, we'll have to exchange gifts.
Yes, but yeah, we are now 8. We started this January 1st, 2015, which I'll be honest feels like a lifetime ago. And it's only been 8 years.
Yeah. I think for somebody in second grade, it would be a lifetime ago.
I mean, my kid wasn't even a glimmer in my eye, as they say, 8 years ago, and she's in kindergarten now. So, yeah, things can change. So yeah, that's that. And you know what our show tagline was 8 years ago when we started? It was the Masterclass, a show about what Jesus said, what Jesus did, and why it matters today.
And that is very fitting with where we are tonight.
That's right. Why, Dave? What are we just finished going through the book Hearing God by Dallas Willard. It was our first extra biblical source for this podcast. But drum roll, we are where are we for the foreseeable future, Dave?
So we're back in the Gospels.
Yup.
And we are taking a look at the book of John. The Gospel according to John.
Indeed. The Gospel according to John. And I'm excited because now we can put the tagline back on the show about what Jesus said and did and why it matters today, because that's what we're actually going to be talking about. And John is, it's not short. So, and we like to talk a lot.
Yeah, it is not short, and I think tonight we've even decided that we're going to go through all of 5 verses, which have plenty in them to discuss. So.
Indeed, yeah. So we are in no rush, at least I'm not, to get through this gospel. I think it took us two and a half years to get through Matthew. So
and that's when we were recording on a regular,
on a weekly basis, yeah. So maybe we'll hit our 10th anniversary when we're in like John chapter 19.
Yeah,
we'll see. But that's where we are.
Okay, I'm just going to say that could be very interesting if it takes us 2 years to get through the book of John. Like, I'd be okay with that. That'd be very interesting if 2025, we're still just finishing this book. But anyway.
It's called expository podcasting, right? Working our way through verse by verse. Well, I'm excited, Dave, because John is not one of the synoptic gospels. So we're gonna have, while we are focusing on Jesus and his ministry, we're gonna get plenty of opportunities to discuss Jesus in ways that we haven't covering previous books of the Bible, because there is so much content that is unique to John when compared to the other 3 gospels. So very exciting.
Yes, sir.
All right. Well, I suppose with all that out of the way, you know what I realized? You're going to read the passage. I get to put the underlying moody music back in now. I haven't had to do that for a while.
Yeah. So the other thing for me is I have one phone instead of 2 right now. And I plan to keep on one phone. So I am actually going to physically read from a Bible, a pages with binding, and I know you always do. You're just a better Christian.
Oh, that is 1, not true, and 2, not dependent upon the form of.
And we are in the ESV when we read, right?
Yes, sir. Well, I am. So, you can be in whatever you want.
So interestingly enough, I do have an English Standard Version. containing both the Old and New Testament. So, yes.
Very good.
Um,
Mine has the New and Old Testament too. That's why it's called the Bible.
and anyway, I'm not going to go down this road, but like one of the things that my daughter wanted for Christmas was a Bible, and she wanted a certain translation, and we can get into that later. But I just always think it's so funny that like she was so excited about it. Like, and I greatly appreciate that. I appreciate that I have an adult child who is like gets a Bible for Christmas and then like goes off on why she's excited about the Bible that she got, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And so anyway, I'll just leave it at that. I won't go too much further. If we get to that at some point, then we will. But
very good. Would you like to do the honors?
and you would like me to read?
Please, sir.
After I got us on that tangent. Okay. So John 1:1 verses 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things were made through him, and without him was not anything made that was made. In him was life, and the life was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. And I think that was verse 5. Is there one more?
Nope, that's it. You're good.
Okay. I will have to admit that I cannot tell the difference between a 5 and a 6 with my glasses, even with my glasses on.
Prescription check. All right. Oh boy. Here we go. So, I don't know. What are your initial thoughts on this? I have thoughts, but I always talk too much, and I would rather hear perhaps what you might think initially about this.
I'm not completely prepared to talk about the synoptic gospels tonight. But as you mentioned, John is not one of those synoptic gospels, and he is much more. His audience are those outside of the Jewish faith, non-Jews, and he is. So anyway, I absolutely love the book of John, and this parallels the creation story in Genesis. And it starts exactly the exact same way. It starts with in the beginning. And so I guess my initial thought is just how John is kind of laying this foundation, this groundwork for just the awesome God that we serve, that is, and the fact that he is the creator.
Mm-hmm.
And there is just this unique dynamic of like God not being one person. Like the Word was with God and the Word was God, but it's not like there's more to it. Like there's this, and so I'm really trying to come at, like in my brain I'm trying to come at this as not knowing things about God and not knowing things about the Hebrew faith and not knowing about what it is that we believe. And so if I were hearing this for the first time and he's talking about the Word and he's talking about the Word being with God and the Word was God, so that's a very unique dynamic, being with God and being God. And then all things were made through him. And then life is in him, and then the light is in him. So this is just like, how fantastic is all of this if you are not like, you're not a believer, you're not somebody that goes, okay, I know Jesus, I know God, all that kind of stuff. Like, this is really kind of mind-blowing concept, in a time where, um, so so the image that comes to my mind, and I know I do this a lot, is refer to movies, because it gives me something kind of concrete to compare to. And I think of Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure when they're with who they refer to as Socrates, Socrates, but just kind of this concept of being in a group of people who value learning, who value knowledge, who value kind of being challenged on what they believe, and this new concept being presented out there, and then grappling with that idea. So I'm going to shut up as well, and I'll let you start talking. But that's kind of where I guess where I'm at. It's just this concept of, you're getting this information for the very first time. You're a thinker. You're intelligent. Because I think this is God's intention. I think God intends our faith, our belief system, to be scrutinized and to be challenged and to be digested, and not just accepted at face value, but sort of kind of dissected and discussed and evaluated. So tag, you're it.
Yeah. So to your point of this, starting the way that Genesis starts, right? In the beginning, God. So if you know the Old Testament, that's kind of what you're expecting, but it's in the beginning was the Word. Okay, well, this is immediately different, right? But secondarily, what I found, I didn't have enough time to get through it all today because I got busy, but I have a commentary on the book of John by George R. Beasley Murray, which sounds just like, what a British name. And so one of the things that he points out is that while that is true, the prologue, as he calls it, also sort of, it sets the stage for what the entire gospel is going to be about. The Word, who we'll find out soon is Jesus. But it also points to what it's going to talk about specifically. So it says the gospel makes the mention of the preexistence of the Son of God in 17:5, his function as the light of the world in 8:12, the life of the world 11:25, the manifestation of his glory 2:11, the unbelief of the world in the face of it chapter 12, 41, 16, 8-11, and the trust of those drawn by it chapter 6, chapter 12, chapter 17. So like even in the prologue, while what he's saying is true and accurate in this one section of explaining who the Word is, when he was around, what he did, it's also laying the groundwork for what he's going to show through the life and ministry of Jesus in more detail later on in the book, which is just really clever writing.
Yeah, I wish I was that smart.
And so we've got this here, right? In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. So immediately we have this strange concept, as you said, right? He was God, but he was also with God. So what's going on here? We've got God, but multiple persons. And then it establishes again, he was in the beginning with God, which is sort of doubling down. Like, this is not a created being. This is not something that God created, because he was with God in the beginning before what? All things were made through him, right? So before all things were made, this word, logos, right, in Greek, and that's a whole nother topic that
it is.
I would need weeks to do research on to get, because to your point of him writing this to Greeks, to Hellenists, this concept of logos already existed in a lot of their philosophy and their thoughts on, life and spirituality and that sort of stuff. So I am not going to go down that trail today. there are plenty of other places you can find out information that are either written or spoken by people that have done the research required to speak intelligently about that. But it's a word choice made intentionally to immediately grab the attention of the Greek listeners or readers, I should say, with a concept that they're familiar with, and to pull them into the story about the God of the Bible and Jesus, the Savior of mankind. And it's so in that sense, not only is this a cleverly written introduction, it is so shrewd in he knows who he's writing to, and he immediately pulls them in by taking a concept that they're familiar with from their point of view and doing what Jesus often did, turning it on its head and making it new. And so I just think it's just such a good way to grab someone's attention of that time and that people group. So
yeah, and it so for us to read it now and for it to say in the beginning was the Word, W-O-R-D, capital W, does not have the same weight as a Greek as a Greek audience hearing John say logos, L-O-G-O-S. It doesn't carry the same weight. And that's fine. I mean, that's fine, because that was who he was writing to, and that was his audience. And so, yeah. Okay, I'll shut up.
You're good. And so John establishes early, right? This word was God, was also with God, and he was in the beginning, right? Okay, so great. Move on. All things were made through him. Okay. All things. And you know what the Greek word for all means, Dave?
No.
All. All things.
Yeah. Like nothing's left out, right?
Yeah, and so to even so he starts with the positive, right? All things were made through him. And then to hammer it home, he goes, and without him was not anything made that was made. So we've got the positive take and the negative take. Everything that was ever made ever in the history of ever was made through him. Mm-hmm. And nothing that has ever existed in the history of ever was made without him. Like,
right.
If it was made, it was through him. Which I don't know what's a more audacious claim, that this word is God and eternal, or that everything ever made ever was made through him. Like, these are big statements.
Yeah.
I mean, eternal, all-encompassing, giant statements about this word.
Yeah, and so if we go back to Genesis and we look at the creation story, verse 3, verse 6, verse 9, verse 11, verse 14, God said, God said, God said. And so what is it that when we say something, what are we using?
Words.
We're using words. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, again, this, like, to me is literally one of those, like, mind-blown kind of, like, we're talking about the word, and if we take a serious look at the creation story, God spoke things into existence. Mm-hmm. Well, what do we speak? We speak words. And so God spoke the word. And again, I am fine with the whole concept of God speaking, like saying, let there be, and it happens. Let there be, and then it happens. But at the same time, I just think this is another example of a finite God trying to be described. No, an infinite God. An infinite God trying to be explained in a finite world.
Yeah. But
it is so, like, I geek out on this. Like, this is one of those things, I just think this is absolutely beautiful.
Mm-hmm. Well, and so think about that, right? Like, is it a coincidence that God spoke and now the Greeks have this term logos, which means word, and it just so happens to work out. Whatever. Like, but just think about this idea, right? God knows everything, which sounds terrible. Like,
yes.
And it's just add it to the list of just how you know that you're not even on, I wouldn't say like level, like, but like just the difference in kind between creator and creation, right? Like, he knows everything, all time, across it all, right? And there's just moments like this where I wonder, like, does this sort of stuff just make him grin a little bit? Or like, does he like wink like, oh yeah, you Greek philosophers and your logos, huh? Bet you don't see this one coming. Like, like he has to a little bit, right?
We're created in his image,
Mm-hmm.
and we get like a kick out of this.
Yeah, we like to laugh and we appreciate cleverness and yeah.
So I can't, like, I refuse to be like, no. Yes, he gets a kick out of this. He does get, like you said, a smile from this.
Well, and we all know, based on the story of Scripture, right? Like, he knows a good plot twist. He knows foreshadowing. Like, he says in the very beginning of the Bible exactly what's going to happen with Jesus and the devil. The devil doesn't see it coming, even though God said you're going to, like. So anyways, I'm getting distracted with that. But I find that connection specifically, right, that you brought up about, God speaking and then this word. It just makes me smile. The other thing, I don't think we'd be able to even guess this, but like, I wonder what it sounds like when God laughs.
Yeah.
My assumption is that it's a sound that we cannot fathom until we're in heaven.
Yeah. So one, how many people have even had that thought of God laughing? Because I believe that is true.
Mm-hmm.
I believe he laughs. And again, I put it in that context of an infinite God in our finite world. And I think it would just be one of those things that, like, on one hand, it's absolutely frightening. But at the same time, there's just like this appealing, like, you're drawn to it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I want it. Like, so that, yeah.
Well, I think I know what I'm going to spend the rest of my life working on.
what God's laugh sounds like?
No, is the joke to get him to laugh. Like, I gotta have the joke. Like, I show up at the pearly gates and I'm like, but I just hit him with it. And he doesn't laugh and he goes, actually, you're going to the other place now, buddy.
I was gonna say, after you get off your knees and he does the whole, like, okay, you can stand up, like, it's good for you to engage, like.
Well, and part of me's like, do I say like a your mom joke because he doesn't have a mom because he wasn't born? Like, anyways, before I get myself in trouble, we should walk firmly away from what I just said. So as we were saying, in him was life, and the life was the light of men.
Yep.
So here's what I find interesting, right?
Mm-hmm.
Verse 4 is past tense. In him was life, and the life was the light of men. Verse 5 is present tense. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. And why is verse 4 in past tense? Is life no longer in him?
So, I mean, my short answer, my truthful answer is I don't know. I do think there is an element of reference back to the creation story and the beginning of time, and an element of, at that particular time, he was life. But I get what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that hasn't changed. And I haven't studied it well enough, but my other thought is I think there's some um, language of how people spoke um, with the Greek that it gets lost in our translation, that we don't completely grasp that. So anyway, yeah, I mean I do think there's a past tense of him at creation, and life came into existence because of who he is, and then a transition to now or then 2,000 years ago, and referring to the light is a current present thing. So I don't know. Do you have a thought on that?
I mean, I have a thought on verse 5 and why it's present tense, but I don't know. It's because maybe it's because Jesus, died but he rose again, right? Like
Right.
key factor.
And the gospel would have been written after that.
Yes, yeah, very much so. Um, I don't know. Maybe it's about the Holy Spirit, right?
Mm-hmm.
Being, I don't know. I'm grasping at straws here, but what's interesting to me about verse 5 is like everything before this was past tense. In the beginning was the Word. He was with God. He was God. He wasn't. And so maybe it's less about 4 and 5 being different than it is just about 5 jumping from
Right.
everything being in the past tense to,
Yep.
oh, also that light, the life that was the light of men, the light shines currently in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. So like it still shines. And
Yeah.
what I found in the commentary about this word that's used here in the ESV to say overcome it, others might say grasp. It says it can mean grasp in the sense of make one's own, to understand, or to overcome and overtake. So the darkness has not been able to overcome, overtake, understand, or make the light its own. It is completely incapable of stopping the light from being the light.
Yeah.
And so I think one of the reasons perhaps that this verse shifts from past to present tense is like, yeah, I'm telling you all of the stuff that happened, but it's still happening.
Yep.
It's still shining. And so we're looking back at the creation story. We were talking about, what the word's role and all of it was. But now fast forward to today, the light still shines. Darkness has not, and frankly will not ever overcome it because it cannot. It is
Yeah.
incapable of doing so.
Which I think is interesting, because that is true in our physical world. Like, that is a truth of like physics. If I am in a completely dark room and I strike a match and that match lights, that light is going to overcome the darkness.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I can't add more darkness to
Yeah,
overcome
because
light.
darkness
Like,
isn't an actual thing. It's just the
right.
absence of light.
Yeah.
So light will
And so,
always win.
yes, light will always win. And so, like, that's just fascinating to me. Like, I no matter how dim the light is, to a certain degree, it's going to overcome the darkness.
Mm-hmm.
But the other thing that I think is true, and I think this has a correlation with our relationship with God and with Jesus, is if I increase my distance from the light, then darkness can overcome that light. But it's not really darkness overcoming the light, it's my distance from the light. And so if I'm near to Jesus, well, then I have his light.
Mm-hmm.
But if in my life I allow there to be distance between him and I, well, then that light becomes dimmer and dimmer and dimmer to, you know, if I'm a mile away from a candle, I'm not going to be able to see that candle.
Yeah.
But if I'm in the immediate presence of that candle's going to overcome the darkness and will be sufficient for me on the darkness of night to at least see the ground before me.
Yep.
If I need it to.
Yeah, and the other thing I was going to say about that too is the longer you are closer to the light, right? Your eyes adjust, right, to the level of light and the level of in there. And so you can have a candle and you can read a book by candlelight. And that's small time, and your eyes adjust but yeah, your proximity is 100% key to the light reaching its full effectiveness on you. And as you said, it's the same spiritually. If we are close and intimate with Jesus, that light is going to shine all over our lives.
Yeah.
Into the nooks and crannies that we had hoped he would never see. But he knows about.
I literally want to be like how does he, and does that ruin our
Well, now I got to put bleeps in.
Because in C.S. Lewis even talks about that, and I can't remember if it's the Screw Tape Letters or where it is where he talks about it, but he talks about nonsense, and
gotcha.
and people get offended, get offended because he's talking about that, and he's like, no, that is a legitimate thing. Like, to be damned is a legitimate thing.
Yeah.
And even though it's become a slang in our culture, to be damned, like has consequences for somebody who is in that category. So,
gotcha.
Anyway, again, sorry, my rabbit trail, and I hope I didn't create work for you and all that. But
you explained yourself. You're fine.
But it's truly like, dang it. Like, I hate that. So, sorry.
No, I understand where you're coming from now. At first, I was like, whoa, pump the brakes, Dave. But I get it now.
Yeah, and even as I say that, like, if it's uttered in frustration, like, I feel like there's truth to it of that would be our consequences if we chose to be that way. Anyway, sorry.
You're fine.
If I apologize too much tonight.
You're fine. You're fine. I mean, that's the 5 verses. But I think, so you talked earlier about, what it would be like for, these Greek non-Christians, non-Jews to hear this. And, I wonder how much verse 5, the hope and the promise that is in verse 5 is lost on them until they come to a knowledge, a saving, knowledge of Jesus. And then they can come back and read this after and go, oh my gosh, it's right there in verse 5. There's the hope. There's the promise. There's the future, right? Of what God is offering us, is that the light has not, will not overcome the darkness because of the word, because of Jesus.
Yeah.
And it's just a verse. But it is potent in what it's really communicating. It's powerful. It's, I dare say, life-giving if you understand what that actually means. The light has not been overcome.
Yeah, and that's, kind of going back to our original conversation of what does this verse mean and what comes to mind of, I have that mental picture of learned people, like, with a true desire to know the truth. And you get presented with something like this. Mm-hmm. And you don't just immediately dismiss it. You don't just immediately go, oh, I know everything, or that's not true, or whatever. But you hear it and you, like, truly take it in and go, okay, in the beginning was the Word, The Word was God. Like using like a logical brain to kind of just grapple with that, combining it with the Holy Spirit coming in and moving in that person's life. And I like again, I if you can't tell, I'm very passionate about this. I'm very excited that we are here with this. Um, but that's just an incredible thing to me of just thinking about that learned person just encountering this for the first time and truly embracing it and truly grappling with it and being open to the point that God's Holy Spirit can come in and move in that person's life and just have that revelation of like, oh, wow, there is hope, there is salvation. And as I complete that thought, I have spent the last week or so, outside of reading the book of John, of just kind of in this place of like, life is just crazy if you don't have kind of an eternal perspective.
Dude,
like what's the point of all of it?
I have been up and down and inside and outside that whole thing for like the last 2 weeks.
Yeah, and that's crazy because again, I think that's God working. Like, why are we both at that place grappling with that? Because how frightening is that? I mean, it's completely like if you have no concept of an eternal God, a loving God, grace, forgiveness, and all those things, like what's the point?
Yeah,
like why?
I would be if I was not a Christian, if I did not believe what the scripture, I would be an absolute monster. Because why not?
That makes more sense.
Thank you.
It makes more sense.
It makes way more sense. I'm here for a limited time. I'm going to do everything within my power to make my life better and therefore your life worse because that will help me get to the top. And I don't understand why, like I've never. Here's the only explanation I can come to, is that people, atheists, agnostics, that just don't even, either we can't know or we know for sure that God's not real and all religions are garbage and the only reason that I can think that they would care about other people and would contribute their time and money to causes like disaster relief or fostering children or anything that says people have value, I'm going to contribute to the value of people being honored and protected. The only reason I can think someone like that would engage in things like that is because God actually does exist and they are made in his image. And even though they refuse to acknowledge him, his image in them still bears itself out in the fact that they see value in other people. That's the only explanation that makes sense to me.
Yeah, I'm with you. And I don't mean to even go, well, I'm going to go there, whether I mean to or not. But the other thing I've been grappling with is suicide. Mm-hmm. And why do people do that? And you know, I'm working in a position where we try to prevent that. That's one of the things that we want to not see happen is people commit suicide. Like we don't want that. And there's this part of me that I'm like, why? If God is not God and we don't believe in eternity, what does it matter? Whether you have 100 days on this earth or you have 100 years on this earth. And in perspective of eternity, there's not much difference between 100 days and 100 years. I mean, they're both minuscule.
Yeah.
But yet we have this like inherent belief that taking your own life is not something you should do. And now I know why I feel that way. Like we said, we're both believers. But if it's all just evolution and survival of the fittest, then... So anyway, yeah.
Yeah, I have a lot more I could say on all of that, but I think maybe we'll save that for another time. Because I'm a little excited tonight, and I want to prevent myself from not thinking through. Because, yeah, I think you get what I'm saying. I don't want to say something without thinking it through. And so, anyways, that being said, go ahead.
So with that, I'm going to say that like inherent of any discussion that we have, talking about being a disciple of Jesus, sitting at his feet, being his disciple, having him mentor us, learning in the master class of Jesus, the meaning of life has a central place. And while we may not answer it tonight, we may not answer it next week, I think that is a critical piece of the whole, like, why do we believe what we believe? Why are we here? All of that kind of stuff. And so, while we might not delve into it, we don't take it lightly, and we may or may not get to it down the road. But if it's important to you, let us know, and we'll tackle it.
Yeah, and I'll just say the only reason I didn't go further on that conversation was because I was starting to think along political lines, and I just am not going to do that tonight, because I want to be happy with this, and that would just annoy me and make me upset. So that backed out.
Good call.
Just for the record. So, man, it feels good to be back in the Bible and specifically in a gospel. It's like, that's what we started the show for.
I would agree with you on that.
We are back to our roots, and it feels so good. All right. Well, then, unless you have more, I think we're at a very good spot to park this baby.
No more. Appreciate everybody listening.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you so much for the time, for the intent, for the attention. Just really cool that people listen. And we appreciate that. And we hope, of course, that the discussion is edifying. So with that being said, show notes can be found at supermegacorp.net/masterclass/214. And frankly, we used to have more podcasts on the network, but it's really only been this one for a while. And I just didn't want to undo the website, remove the feed, re-upload to so we're just going to keep it where it's at. And if more shows appear in the future, then we have a spot for them. If not, then we have a one podcast network, and that's funny and it makes me giggle. So I'm for it.
Yeah.
So anyways, show notes are also in your podcast app of choice if you're listening on a mobile device. Yeah, you can say hi if you want to. There's ways to do that in the show notes, I think. And maybe I took them out. I don't remember. I'm not on Twitter anymore.
Yeah, I'm not.
I haven't been in ages. Maybe I'll put the email in there just in case you want to say hi. But yeah, that's that. Farewell.
Bye.